We'll take questions at the end, beginning with questions on site. If you have a question on Zoom, I would ask that you please use the raise hand function. Bonjour, merci d'être ici avec nous pour une conférence de presse avec le chef du NPD Jagmeet Singh et notre chef adjoint Alexandre Bouleris. On va prendre des questions à la fin en commençant avec des questions des gens en personne. Si vous avez une question sur Zoom, je vous demande d'utiliser la fonction lever la main. Alors, Alex, je vous passe la parole.
Merci, Alana. Bonjour tout le monde. Alors, Alexandre Bouleris, député de Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Ça me fait plaisir d'être ici à Montréal, dans le comté de Justin Trudeau, pour faire une annonce importante du chef du NPD, Jagmeet Singh, et aussi souligner la présence de Nima Machouf, qui, avec moi ce soir, va devenir officiellement candidate dans Laurier-Sainte-Marie pour aller déloger à Stephen Guilbeault et amener une vraie députation progressiste et de gauche à Ottawa pour les gens du plateau Mont-Royal. On est ici pour parler du coût de la vie, de l'épicerie, puis de l'absence de plan sérieux du ministre Champagne, qui, en fait, nous dit, grosso modo, faites confiance aux gros PDG qui s'en mettent plein les poches, puis si vous pouvez, aller chercher des circulaires puis découper des coupons de rabais, comme le fait Moment dans la petite vie. C'est pas un plan sérieux, puis on est ici pour dire, c'est un problème grave, les gens ont de la difficulté à se nourrir, les gens en arrachent, les gens doivent faire des choix qui sont difficiles, puis nous, au NPD, on a un vrai plan pour aider les gens concrètement, contrairement aux libéraux, qui se mettent à genoux, qui croisent les doigts, puis qui espèrent que les choses vont changer, de stabiliser les prix quand ils sont déjà trop élevés. C'est pas sérieux. Nous, on a un plan sérieux. Je cède la parole à Jagmeet Singh, qui va vous le présenter.
Merci beaucoup. Un grand merci à mon ami et notre chef adjoint, Alexandre Bouleris et Nima Machouf, pour votre présence. Donc, comme Alexandre a dit, on est dans un temps difficile. Ça fait 21 mois que les prix des épiceries étaient plus hauts que l'inflation générale. Ça veut dire presque 2 ans que les gens ont eu de la difficulté à acheter des épiceries. Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire dans la vie des gens? Ça veut dire qu'on a des familles qui font des gros sacrifices parce qu'ils ne peuvent pas acheter les épiceries nécessaires. J'ai parlé avec plusieurs familles qui disent que pour la première fois, on s'occupe, notre inquiétude, c'est quoi le coût des épiceries au lieu des valeurs ou au lieu de qualité de nourriture. Ça, c'est une grande différence. On est dans un temps où il y a plus que jamais l'utilisation des banques alimentaires dans un pays assez riche que le nôtre. Donc, c'est un vrai problème. Et c'était quoi la réponse? C'était quoi la réponse du gouvernement libéral? Ils ont demandé aux mêmes PDG qui ont créé le problème de gentiment stabiliser les prix. C'est une approche ridicule, effectivement. Et de plus, c'était des inactions, une inaction depuis 2 ans, et puis leur grande action, c'est, comme Alexandre a dit, de regarder les circulaires, comme on n'a pas le fait dans le passé, comme on n'avait pas des circulaires dans le passé. Donc, c'est vraiment une approche ridicule parce qu'on ne peut pas croire les mêmes PDG qui ont exploité la situation pour gagner des profits records de eux-mêmes régler le problème. Ça, c'est pourquoi on propose notre solution. Notre solution, c'est de renforcer les pouvoirs du bureau de concurrence pour forcer ces entreprises de réduire leurs prix. Il y a plusieurs pratiques que ces grandes entreprises utilisent qui, effectivement, les laissent augmenter les prix sans sanction. Donc, ce qu'on va faire, on va protéger les consommateurs, on va mettre fin aux pratiques de fixer les prix. Parce qu'il faut se souvenir que les grandes entreprises des épiceries, les grands PDG, ont fixé les prix du pain il y a quelques années. Donc, ils ont par exprès augmenté les prix du pain, créé des grands problèmes dans la vie des gens. Et l'approche du gouvernement libéral, c'est de les demander gentiment de stabiliser les prix. Donc, ce premier ministre ne comprend pas les réalités des gens, n'agit pas. Ça, c'est pourquoi je suis ici, dans le comté du premier ministre, ici, dans Papineau, pour dire clairement, notre plan, c'est de forcer ces grandes entreprises d'épicerie, ces PDG, et ces entreprises qui, à cause de leur avarice, augmentent les prix d'épicerie, de dire non, c'est fini. On doit les forcer de réduire les prix avec plus de pouvoir pour mettre fin aux exploitations, aux pratiques de fixer les prix. Donc ça, c'est ce qu'on propose. Et ce que ça veut dire pour les familles, ça veut dire qu'au lieu d'avoir peur chaque fois que vous allez aux épiceries, au lieu d'avoir peur est-ce que je vais avoir l'occasion d'acheter les épiceries nécessaires pour nourrir ma famille, au lieu d'avoir cette peur, on peut, au lieu de cibler comment va ma recette, comment va la préparation pour la nourriture, au lieu de s'inquiéter de est-ce que je peux aborder, est-ce que je peux me permettre d'acheter les épiceries. Ça, c'est ce qu'on propose. Personne ne doit pas avoir cette peur. On peut avoir une situation où les gens peuvent acheter les épiceries nécessaires pour leur famille et peuvent avoir des célébrations ensemble avec la famille. Cette action de grève, si le gouvernement a pris notre approche, on aurait dû avoir une situation complètement différente, mais on va continuer de mettre la pression, on continue de mettre la pression sur ces grandes entreprises et le gouvernement de faire ce qu'il faut. So I just want to add in English as well. We're in a situation right now where for 21 months, the cost of food has outpaced general inflation. That means 2 years almost that Canadians, people here in Quebec and across the country, have been struggling with the cost of their food. It means families that earn good salaries are saying we're more worried about the cost of our food than we are about the quality of food. It means sacrifice. Families are having to sacrifice not buying the food that is important for families, the food that's necessary to keep families healthy, and instead of worried about how much it costs. And what has been the approach of the Liberal government? For 2 years, nothing. And they only now started caring or acting like they care when they're down in the polls. And that's why I'm here today in the riding of Justin Trudeau in Papineau to send a clear message. Your plan to ask CEOs nicely to reduce prices is ridiculous. These are the same CEOs that used inflation as cover to jack up their prices. They're not going to bring down their prices on their own. That's why we're putting forward a challenge. We've got a law that will protect consumers, strengthen the laws of the Competition Bureau, put an end to price fixing, put an end to price gouging, and really give people a shot so that this Thanksgiving, if we had put in place our law, what we want to see is that people can go and focus on making sure they're following their recipe, not worried about if they can afford groceries. I want families to be able to focus on enjoying time with their loved ones, enjoying recipes that they've passed down from generation to generation, cooking food and enjoying that food together, laughing and having that fun that people should be able to have. You're allowed to, and you should be able to find time to come together and not worry that you can't afford the groceries. So that's what we're putting forward. That's why we're here in Papineau to put forward our plan, which is to force these companies to make prices more affordable, not to just ask them nicely. With that, je suis prêt pour vos questions. I'm ready for any questions you might have.
Nous commencerons avec les questions sur place, suivies par les questions en ligne. Vous auriez une question et un suivi. Nous commencerons avec Radio-Canada.
J'ai 2 questions pour mes collègues d'Ottawa sur Airbnb. On a le premier ministre qui veut réduire le nombre de logements Airbnb au Canada pour apaiser la crise du logement. Pensez-vous que c'est une bonne idée?
Si on parle de crise du logement, on doit premièrement souligner que c'est un grand problème avec plusieurs enjeux et ça va prendre plusieurs solutions. Donc, il n'y a pas une solution qui va régler tout le problème. Mais le problème en général, c'est depuis longtemps, depuis des décennies, les gouvernements libéraux et conservateurs ont effectivement créé un marché qui est excellent pour les riches investisseurs, mais un marché qui ne fonctionne pas pour les travailleurs, pour les familles, pour les jeunes, pour nos personnes âgées. Ça, c'est vraiment le problème. Donc, pour régler ce problème, on a besoin de plusieurs actions. Je suis d'accord qu'il y a un problème avec le fait qu'il y a plusieurs appartements utilisés par des entreprises comme Airbnb qui effectivement réduisent les opportunités pour les familles d'avoir un appartement à long terme. Donc, ça, c'est un problème. Mais plus grand que ça, c'est le fait que le gouvernement fédéral n'a pas joué un rôle clair et actif pour construire du logement abordable. Et quand Justin Trudeau a été posé la question, il a dit que ce n'est pas la juridiction fédérale. Cette approche de dire, oh, ce n'est pas ma responsabilité, de dire que c'est des autres partis, des autres niveaux du gouvernement qui doivent régler ça. Cette approche de trouver quelqu'un à blâmer, ce n'est pas une approche qui va se régler le problème. Mon approche, c'est on doit prendre au sérieux cette crise, on doit utiliser le pouvoir, le terrain, les ressources fédérales pour travailler ensemble avec les provinces et rapidement construire du logement abordable pour les familles.
Puis deuxième question, vous y avez répondu un peu, mais justement, juridiction, pensez-vous que le fédéral a un rôle à jouer?
Absolument. Et encore, on a une première ministre, Justin Trudeau, qui essaie de trouver quelqu'un à blâmer au lieu de faire le travail nécessaire. En même temps, on a une chef de parti conservateur qui fait la même chose, qui veut blâmer les municipalités et les gouvernements municipaux. Mon approche, c'est on doit travailler ensemble. Il n'y a aucun doute. Et le gouvernement fédéral a un grand rôle à jouer pour aider, pour régler cette crise. Et ça veut dire utiliser le terrain, les ressources, le pouvoir fédéral pour travailler ensemble avec les provinces et municipalités pour construire du logement abordable. Ça veut dire du logement à but non lucratif. Ça veut dire du logement coopératif, mais vraiment de prendre au sérieux cette crise.
La prochaine question vient de LCN.
Marie-Lise de TVA. Hier, il y a le ministre Philippe Champagne qui a mentionné qu'à la lecture des circulaires, il avait déjà commencé à voir les impacts du plan sur les prix des aliments. Qu'est-ce que vous en pensez?
Je pense que son plan, c'est comme j'ai dit, c'est un plan vraiment ridicule parce que ça fait, comme j'ai dit, presque 2 ans que le prix des épiceries était plus haut que l'inflation générale. Après 2 ans que les familles ont eu des grandes difficultés, des grands défis, après 2 ans, c'était quoi effectivement le plan? De demander les mêmes PDG qui ont exploité les gens de réduire, pas réduire, de stabiliser le prix. Stabiliser les prix qui étaient déjà trop hauts. Ce n'est pas un plan sérieux. Et on a vu plusieurs critiques. Et c'était des critiques honnêtes, des critiques vraies. Pourquoi le gouvernement laisse les grandes entreprises exploiter les gens et maintenant pense que les mêmes gens qui ont exploité une situation vont la régler eux-mêmes? Ce n'est pas crédible comme plan. Ça, c'est pourquoi j'ai mis mon plan, un projet de loi qui va renforcer les pouvoirs du bureau de concurrence, qui va mettre fin aux pratiques de fixer les prix des épiceries, comme le pain dans le passé, des pouvoirs pour avoir des grandes sanctions contre les entreprises qui exploitent les gens, qui abusent des consommateurs. Ça, c'est la façon de forcer ces grandes entreprises d'arrêter cette exploitation. Ça, c'est notre approche, une approche sérieuse, une approche qui va vraiment aider les gens.
Notre prochaine question vient de CTV.
Prime Minister, you've answered this a little bit already, but just to be very clear, the Prime Minister gave the Big Five until Thanksgiving to come up with a plan to fix high prices. Do you think that what we heard from Champagne yesterday is in line with that promise?
Not at all. The Liberal government, the Prime Minister Trudeau promised to bring down prices for food by this Thanksgiving. That's a couple of days away. And the reality is their plan, and I'm going to be very firm here, is ridiculous. It's been 2 years, 21 months, almost 2 years since food prices have been elevated beyond the general inflation. So for 2 years, Canadians have been struggling with the cost of their groceries, have been hurting when it comes to buying food for their family. They've been saying, what do we do? We're not sure how we can handle high rent and high grocery prices. And after 2 years, their plan is to meet with the CEOs and say, please lower the prices. No, not lower the prices, please stabilize the prices. It's hard for me to even say that because it doesn't make sense. Why are they asking them to stabilize prices that are so high when they should be reduced? Our plan is not to ask these powerful CEOs nicely. Our plan is to take them on directly. We're the only party with the courage to say corporate greed is driving up the cost of food, and we need to fight back. And that's why our plan is to put an end to price fixing, put an end to price gouging by giving the Competition Bureau the power it needs to crack down on these practices. This is a real plan to take on the high food prices that will actually bring it down.
Just maybe you could talk a little bit more. Is this a competition problem in your eyes?
Oh, absolutely. We actually we called on the Competition Bureau to investigate food prices. You'll recall we also summoned the big CEOs of the large corporate grocery stores to come to Parliament. And we asked them the question, how is it that you're making record profits and at the same time you're making people pay the highest prices ever for groceries while people are having the most struggle ever to buy their groceries? And they had no answer for that. And then the Competition Bureau confirmed that what's going on is the large corporate grocery stores, which own basically the majority of grocery stores in our country, there's basically 3 companies, Loblaws, Metro, and Sobeys, that own the vast majority of grocery stores, are abusing their dominant market share. And in doing that, they are increasing their profits, they are increasing their margins. So the Competition Bureau came out and said, absolutely, we need to strengthen competition, we need more of it, and we need to make sure that people are being protected. That's something this Liberal government is not doing. That's something Justin Trudeau is not doing. That's why I'm here in Papineau to say we've got to change this, putting a challenge. Let's take on that corporate greed with our law, which will actually fight back and protect consumers and bring down prices. Thanks.
We're going to move to questions on Zoom. Just a reminder to use the raise hand function if you do have a question. Our first question comes from Tom Perry with the CBC. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Mr. Singh. Thanks for taking our questions. Can I just, in sort of a follow-up to that last question, just so I'm clear, are you talking about, do you want the federal government to mandate, to tell grocery chains what they can and can't charge for commodities, for basic products?
We've laid out our plan in a bill that I presented in Parliament, which is publicly available. And what that bill does, it forces these large corporate grocery stores to stop exploiting people. And there's a number of mechanisms we put in place. We saw in 2018 that large bread producers and grocery stores fixed the price of bread in our country. What we propose in our law is a strengthening of the Competition Bureau, which would put an end to price fixing. We also know there's price gouging or abuse of dominant market share. And there's steps that the Competition Bureau has asked for that will allow them to stop these abuses. One example of an abuse is in Halifax, the Dollarama sells bread at a much lower price than local grocery stores. But where there's a Sobeys in the same area as the Dollarama, they're not allowed to sell bread. This is anti-competition behavior that allows these large corporate grocery stores to really rip off Canadians. So what our bill is, it would force them to lower prices by taking away some of these abuses that they're doing, strengthening the laws that would allow for the Competition Bureau to crack down on some of these abusive practices, really protecting consumers and using laws to strengthen accountability that would allow for consumers to be protected and to bring down prices that way.
And if I could ask you just on a different topic, your party has, I guess, rejected the first draft of legislation on pharmacare that's been put forward by the Liberals. So where are the discrepancies between what you're looking for on pharmacare and what the government is offering at this point?
Certainly. So the main summary, if I could summarize the difference between the Liberal government and Justin Trudeau's approach and the New Democrat approach and my approach as leader, is the Liberals have continually chosen to protect the billionaire pharmaceutical industry instead of families. And that's what they're doing again in their proposal in the first draft. Just to remind folks, the board that sets medication prices in Canada had a series of significant resignations because they were protesting the fact that this Liberal government and the finance minister at the time, effectively this Liberal prime minister, were siding with the pharmaceutical industry and hampering their ability to bring down prices for medication. They resigned to send a clear message that this is wrong. And that is, again, what's happening with their proposal. This is a bill that is more interested in protecting the interests of pharmaceutical companies than protecting people in our country that need to buy medication. So what we're looking for is a foundational law that will set that foundation for universal public pharmacare, which would mean for a family that has to worry about the cost of medication, has to worry about on top of food prices and rent, they have to worry about paying for the medication, they wouldn't have to worry about that. It would alleviate that pressure. They would not have to feel that weight of saying, how am I going to afford this? How am I going to be able to afford the medication I need to stay healthy? They wouldn't have to worry about that. That's what our plan is about. Let's make sure Canadians don't have to worry about medication and have a universal program that covers it.
Our next question comes from the Canadian Press. Go ahead, please, Najoud.
Hi there. So on the point of grocery prices, I mean, we've seen Mr. Champagne post to, refer to other countries that have managed to get grocers to reduce prices, freeze prices on a variety of goods. Are you saying that you aren't supportive of those kind of tactics that have been taken on in Europe, where they've gotten grocers to freeze prices on a variety of goods, cut prices?
We can absolutely do a lot more to bring down prices. What I'm saying is that the Liberal government's approach is a failure and their plan is ridiculous. Let me explain why. It's been almost 2 years that they have known that food prices are going up much faster than general inflation. That means people have been hurting for 2 years. And after 2 years, only when the Liberals were starting to tank in the polls did they start to act like they cared. And what their plan was effectively to meet with CEOs and ask them nicely to bring down prices. That, I'm sure, for viewers listening, sounds pretty ridiculous. That the very same people that exploited inflation and jacked up food prices and ripped off Canadians, ripped off Quebecers, that somehow they were going to, on their own, come up with a plan to stabilize prices is somehow a way to respond to what has been for 2 years a major concern of people is pretty ridiculous. And what we're saying is what we need is a very strong approach. And that's what our bill is proposing. Strengthening competition laws, which would actually keep our laws more in line with some of the laws around the world. Strengthen the sanctions. Have strict and severe penalties on companies that abuse consumers, that fix prices. In Canada, large companies and CEOs that fixed bread prices got really no sanction, minimal fines. Nothing happened. In the States, when prices were fixed for food, the CEOs went to jail. That's how seriously it should be taken. So that's what we're saying. We need stronger laws and a real approach that protects consumers and brings down the price of food, not just asking the CEOs nicely, but forcing it to happen by having stronger laws.
Experts, say that more competition is needed in the sector, but that's not something that can happen overnight. So do you agree that there's not really a quick fix in terms of bringing down grocery prices?
Well, I think that there's two different things that we need to deal with. There's a systemic or structural problem that's going to take some more time. That's a competition issue, which the Competition Bureau also identified. We need more competition in Canada. We've got basically 3 companies that run the majority of grocery stores in the country, and that's a problem. And we're seeing that impact because there's less competition means higher prices for people. There's effectively a monopoly on these food prices because of these large corporations. So that's a problem, and we've got to tackle that. But there are things that we can do immediately. There's anti-competition behavior that is going on right now that can quickly be ended. I gave the example of that Dollarama store in Halifax. That store literally sells cheaper bread, but cannot sell bread if there's a Sobeys nearby. That is what we would call anti-competition behavior. Behavior that benefits the large player, allows them to abuse their dominant market share, and hurts consumers. That's a practice we could end immediately with stronger laws. So what we're talking about is stronger laws that would immediately be put in place that would give consumers more protection and could bring down the price of food more rapidly. Then there's longer term goals like increasing competition, which would take more time. But there's things we could do immediately that would have an impact in people's lives right now that this Liberal government is not willing to do because their approach has been to let this happen for 2 years and now make a show of acting.
Our next question comes from Sarah Ritchie. Go ahead, please, Sarah.
Good morning. Just hoping to get your response on a different topic. I wrote a story yesterday about a group of artists and architects that is frustrated with the government overturning its process in awarding the commission for the monument to Canada's mission in Afghanistan. I know opposition parties have called for the ministers to appear before a committee to discuss this. I'm just looking for your response to the fact that the government overturned a jury's decision after a lengthy process and went with what it says was the decision of veterans in a survey.
That on the face of it sounds like a bad approach, that if there was a decision that was in place by a jury. Folks were able to come together and have a decision, and that seems to have been overturned here. On the face of it, sounds like a problem. In general, we're seeing more and more this Liberal government having a strong or a very hard time being able to properly manage many files. We're seeing lots of examples of that, and this seems to be another one that adds to the ongoing track record of this government not being able to make the right decision. And when there's a clear decision in front of them that seems to have been supported, to overturn that and go with a different approach without really explaining it to the people impacted seems like, again, another example of this Liberal government continuing to mismanage files that should not be treated this way.
Did you
And
have
is there
a
a follow-up?
follow-up?
Nope, that's fine. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
We're not seeing any more questions online, so Jagmeet, I will turn it over to you for closing remarks.
OK. Encore un grand merci à mon chef adjoint, un grand merci à Nima Machouf. Ce qu'on propose aujourd'hui dans le comté du Premier ministre du Canada, du comté de Justin Trudeau, ici à Papineau, c'est l'approche de ce gouvernement concernant le coût de la vie, la hausse des prix pour les épiceries. C'est une approche qui a fait mal aux gens. Et on dit clairement que leur plan de demander gentiment aux grandes entreprises, des PDG, de ces grandes entreprises, de stabiliser le prix, c'est une approche ridicule. Ce qu'on doit faire, c'est de mettre en place des lois concrètes, des pouvoirs forts pour forcer ces entreprises de réduire le prix. C'est exactement ce qu'on va faire. On est là pour vous. On va continuer de se battre pour vous. Ici, dans le comté de Justin Trudeau et à Ottawa, on va continuer de se battre pour les gens, pour les familles et pour les travailleurs. Merci.